I'm Jennifer Faust, the Executive Director of the Pacific Council on International Policy. For those who aren't familiar with the Pacific Council, it's a membership organization centered on global affairs. We're a nonprofit in the heart of downtown Los Angeles. A special welcome to our members who've been able to join us here today. The Pacific Council is pleased to partner with the California State Assembly and Speaker Anthony Rendon's office under our Global Water Scarcity Project. Under this initiative, the Pacific Council seeks to build knowledge, inspire and incubate ideas, and motivate action on global water scarcity through ongoing activities, events, and education. This important issue is one that requires international conversation and idea exchange. Today's conversation seeks to do just that, to learn about water projects all around the world in order to position the LA River for a successful revitalization. By acting locally, we can contribute to global solutions to water scarcity, and I look forward to hearing about the examples from South Korea and the Netherlands from today's panelists. If you have any questions about the Pacific Council, I encourage you to seek out our membership officer who's here today. Alex, would you raise your hand? Great. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Jose Fierro, president of Cerritos College, who has a background in biodiversity and will help us think about the public health angle of this conversation. He will lead the conversation with our distinguished panel, who will join us from around the world. Our panelists include the Honorable Anthony Rendon, Speaker of the California State Assembly. Speaker Rendon has been instrumental in the LA River Revitalization Project and has put together this very wonderful event. Representative Josan Manders, who is the representative from the province of Gelderland in the Netherlands. Her role includes water management and cultural infrastructure and preservation in her province. We also have Ms. Madeline Glickfield. She's chair of the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board and an expert on resource conservation. And the Honorable Typhoon Koo, consul for political affairs at the Consulate General of the Republic of Los Angeles. Consul Koo will speak to his unique experience living and working near both the LA River and Chegaejeon River in Seoul, South Korea. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, for the introductions. My name is Jose Fierro, and I'm the President and Superintendent of Cerritos College, just down the road. And it's my pleasure to have the opportunity to moderate this panel today. As it was mentioned in the introduction, I will be trying to stimulate a conversation about the benefits from the public health point of view of revitalizing a river and creating green spaces and recreational spaces across the LA River. As many of you know, the LA River spans 51 miles, covers 17 cities, 23 LA neighborhoods, and 6 incorporated areas within 1 mile of the river. Many of us use the river as points of recreation activities, riding our bikes down the riverbed, and obviously it will be nice to see the quality of life of all of us that live closer to the riverbed increase by beautifying the river and making outdoor spaces available to all of us. So I would like to ask the panelists to provide us a quick 1-minute introduction of their background, their passion, and their interest in revitalization of the rivers based on their specific background. So I will start with the speaker, Mr. Rendon.
Thank you, Dr. Fierro. This is my district. The LA River runs through 5 of the 9 cities, 6 of the 9 cities in my district. So this is an incredible linking opportunity for the district. It's something that is, whether you're in an airplane or whether you're in a car or wherever you are in the district, it's an incredible visual it's something that you see everywhere from the district. So from that perspective, it's impossible to ignore. But in traveling around other parts of the world, I've seen the river in South Korea. Went for an amazing jog along the river in South Korea. Another river in Jerusalem that I had, a revitalized river in Jerusalem that I was able to see a couple of years ago. And you see those revitalization efforts in other places, and you start to wonder why not here. You start to wonder why not, given all that we seem capable of doing, given our cultural strength, given our engineering prowess. In California, you start to wonder why we can't do that here. So it's a mixture of being impacted by this river, but also being impacted by rivers all over the world.
That was very loud. I'm Josaan Meijers, and I'm from the Netherlands. And I live on the levee, or the dike of the Waal, W-A-A-L. That's a part of the Rhine, for people who are very good, have listened in at school when it was about geography. It's a very long river. It's about 800 miles altogether, and 50 miles of that big river come through our county, our province of Gelderland. So every day when I get up, I see the Waal, and I know it's a beautiful river, but I also know it's a very dangerous river, because we've had very high water levels over the past years, much higher than we used to have, and we realized that we had to strengthen the dikes in a very short time. And we also realized that we had always fought against water, but we thought, what if we stop fighting the water and start living with the water and enjoying it, but also living with it? So we decided to make a program, Room for the River, and we've done a lot of projects in that program. One of them is on the screen up there. You can have a look at the photos. And we've decided to expand that program over the coming years and see if we can give the river more space, more room, and therefore create other possibilities as well, not just safety, but also recreation, enjoying the river in times of normal water levels. And we find that our inhabitants are very happy with it, very happy to enjoy the river.
Thank you.
My name is Taylor. I'm a consul from the Korean consulate in LA. And the last time I heard from the LA Revitalization, I was thinking about what happened in Seoul. And there was a little stream about half size of the LA River right now here. And back when I was like a kid, when I grew up, there was a little street in the middle of Seoul named after the stream, but I never been able to find the stream. So I asked my dad, hey, where is the stream? And he said, well, it's down under. Actually, because the government tried to, the river was actually, it was covered and they built a road on top of it, and there was an overpass going up. And the district became very unsafe, and the water inside, below the cover, was getting rotting. So in early 2000, the government or city of Seoul trying to revitalizing the stream, and they uncovered the stream, and they tried to make it as a public park, or the place where you can enjoy the ecological, the atmosphere, and also there was the little shops around the stream became very popular. They had a little cafe or a restaurant, and it became a very popular people's tourism spot. So it's more like it became like dating forest. I took my wife there, walking down there, and there was a little stream running around, and there was like fish living there, and people take their kids when they, when they have a pastime, Sundays or Saturdays, to see the stream or be there. So I think it would be very nice if the LA River could become something like that. So I'd like to share with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for honoring me and bringing me to this. Not many people, regulators are not terribly popular festival speakers, so thank you very much. So I'm going to tell you the same thing sort of that you did. I have a very personal story with the LA River. When I was growing up, I lived in the upper watershed of the Tioga River, near the foothills, and I would pack my lunch and hike over the mountain and into the river. I would just do what kids do, just fool around and look at the river and try to avoid rattlesnakes. My husband grew up in a different part of the river, and he used to go down there fishing with his friends for crawdads. So both of us grew up near this river. His part is now in concrete. My part has got fences along it to keep homeless people out. That is what we need to change. It's what we need to change. So my grown-up experience, first experience with the river was I was also a regulator under the Coastal Commission. And the Army Corps of Engineers, the same people that we met today, came to us and they said, we have to raise the levees of the river. And I said, are we becoming more tropical? Is there more rain coming down? And finally, what I realized is that in this region, we paved over so much of the watershed that water that used to get into the ground, filter into the ground, now runs off at very high speeds and into the channel. And that's in fact why the people in 1930 decided they would control and channelize this whole place. So it also was the reason that people said, oh, they're going to raise the levee and separate us further from the river. We can do better than that. So I think that and the proposal to put another freeway over the river sort of galvanized people. And since the 1990s, there's been a lot of efforts, but not enough efforts on the lower. A lot of efforts on the upper river. And to me, coming here today represents the kind of hope. I see people for the river in action. I see all kinds of groups here that are going to be doing the same thing in the lower river than we have in the upper river. So thank you.
Thank you, and that is a great segue for our next part of the conversation. That is the efforts in order to develop and revitalize the lower part of the river, as you mentioned, is probably the busiest corridor of the LA River. And there have been many efforts in the past, but the most recent effort, and I think an effort that is getting a lot of momentum, not only locally but at the state level, is an effort that was introduced by Speaker Rendon, AB 530. The focuses in the last 19 miles of the LA River, so the lower part of the river. And this effort, the part that makes me excited about this effort is the community health perspective, the public health perspective. My river MB began many years ago when I was growing in Bogota, Colombia. We have a river that is called the Bogota River. It's a river that is, for all practical purposes, that you can't really use it. And when I was little, I had the opportunity to visit Medellin, the city of Medellin, the Medellin River, which has been revitalized. There are nice bicycle tracks. There is a live festival during the Christmas, and it's a point of gathering for the community. And it's similar to what we see today, but it happens all the time. Provides life to the city, life to the river. And the project continues to develop, which is something that I think it could be done in a city like LA, maintain it vibrant and provide better quality of life for our neighboring communities. So, Speaker, why don't you tell us a little bit about the background of the AB 530, where we are, and the reasons behind your effort and trying to get all of us together here.
Sure. Thank you. I suffered from river envy too. I still do. We've seen, and Madeline mentioned it, we've seen great revitalization efforts in other parts of the river. I always tell the story about seeing it visually from the air when you fly in, and this sort of green ribbon that is the LA River in the city of LA area. And then it suddenly gets to the city of LA boundary, and all the development seems to end as though there were an ocean there. The river ends. So I think it was that same river envy that drove me to write AB 530. And what was interesting about that bill was, for me, AB 530 was always an opportunity for the community to have a conversation about what they wanted the lower river to be. When I would go in and talk to other members about the bill, and I'd go in and talk to the governor about the bill, the question that they always asked me was, what do you want to do? What do you want the river to be? And I used to continually say, that's not what this bill is about. This bill is not about what I want the river to be. This bill was about setting up a community group to talk about the river. And they did that for 18 months. People showed up for 18 months. People showed up and talked for 3 hours at a time. I only went twice. I only went to 2 meetings. Once I showed up to drop off pizza, and then I left. And then I showed up at the last meeting when they were adopting the final plan. And for me, that was intentional. For me, that was me wanting the group to operate on their own, to function on their own, to not wonder about what I wanted. I don't think they did. I don't think they really cared. Because once they sort of got rolling, it was their conversation. It was their dialogue. And ultimately, that's what all of this is about, not just the river, but ultimately democracy and sort of rebuilding our democratic institutions, which we see are in decay everywhere. And if this can help to build that conversation, a conversation not only about the river, but a conversation between communities about empowerment, about what we want our communities to look like and what we want our communities to function like, then that's as great as any other contribution we could possibly make.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And the same question for Ms. Mayors. What drove the conversation and the outcomes on the revitalization of the river in your hometown?
That's a very interesting question, because these conversations aren't always easy. When you go to people and say something has to change, in our case, we had to strengthen the levees, and we had to make them higher. And we knew it would demolish some houses, but it would also create opportunities. That's a very difficult conversation. So what we did, we tried to get people together. It's a bit similar. Both the engineers and the planners and all the workers, but also the community. And we said, if we all come together and we make the plan together, we will get a better plan. That's one side of the story. And the other one is that we have this big river floating through our county. And we built a community over the last 10 years, not exactly about measures we had to take, but more about how to live with the river, how to enjoy the river, how to recreate or how to make it nicer. And we found that artists are a very special group of people who can help you by redesigning the area and by inventing things to do, like this festival. We didn't have a festival like this, but we had all sorts of events by the river. And I thought that was very helpful to get people to the river, to enjoy the space and to enjoy each other, to enjoy the community. So that's how we worked over the last 15 years.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kur, the same question. When you were involved in the process of the revitalization of the river, what drove the conversation, how you developed the plan, and the benefits of the effort that you made?
Oh, well, for the LA River, actually the speaker's office called me and whether we could provide some of the materials for the example that how the little stream called the Cheonggyecheon is so whether how it was before and how it was developed and how was it after. So I called our government officer back in the Seoul metropolitan city government and tried to get you some of the materials. In the meantime, actually, I grew up here and I had a very attached to this place. I grew up in the Long Beach school, in junior high and high school here. So I was really attached to this place, and maybe I should be able to find some of the materials, some of the examples, so that the place we love, so dearly love, the LA River, to become some of the place that when we imagine the Long Beach or imagine the down part of the LA River, we can think of the place that where we can go, where we can share our experiences or the atmosphere with my loved ones. It would be wonderful. So I try to get you some of the material, some examples. So maybe can show you what could become, what this LA River could become in the future if this project could be finished. So that's how we share. Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Group. So, Ms. Whitfield, I know you have been involved with the river for many years, and you have almost firsthand witnessed many of the different plans that have been developed for the river over the last several decades, I think. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the historical perspective and how this new effort actually is different and the other plans and how this could potentially move us into the future?
Well, it's not just whether a new plan is better. It's one that community people did and believe in. And I have to say that in the 1990s, when everything was becoming very active up north, the difference was that there were local government officials and state government officials that were very receptive to the idea that this river that we've turned our backs on for so long, that we've separated from people for so long, that we needed to turn ourselves back to the river. At the same time, the old guard that was here in places like Southgate and Bell, they were so concerned about flood control because they're below sea level. They didn't want the high flood insurance rates. They were afraid that any kind of restoration was going to harm them. So then you have the speaker, you have new leadership here that understands that, yes, there needs to be flood control, but there also needs to be connection. And there also needs to be a positive resource. People in these communities deserve to have a river that they're proud of, that they can get into, that they can say our children in the summertime can play in without getting sick. So I think that is what's changed, is the attitude of the people who live here and the leaders they've chosen.
Well, thank you. That is an excellent point. Not long ago, I had the opportunity to read an article that stated something very similar to what you mentioned. The first efforts of pave the river essentially was something that came top down out of a huge necessity at the time. But now the efforts of revitalizing the river need to involve the community. And like you, I think the difference at this particular time is that many of us have voices, and our voices are being heard, and it's a way forward that is supported by the community. So thank you for the comments. So if you could do anything and just wave a magic wand, what would you do for the river and the communities near the river that not only provide the river with the life that we have discussing, but the communities with the quality of life that we all deserve when we live near a river?
I think I would just get everybody down here once. I think that would be enough. I think once people come here, what was interesting about the river was, and and it's actually analogous to why we're having an art festival today. I remember people saying that nobody uses the river, that it's abandoned and nobody uses it. I also remember people saying there's no artists in Southeast Los Angeles. When I started running along the river and biking along the river, it was immediately clear that anybody who says that nobody uses the river has never been here. The utilization of this river, whether it's the middle of the summer, whether it's weekdays, weekends, the usage is incredible. It's impressive. That being said, we deserve better. We deserve better in Southeast Los Angeles County. We deserve a river that looks like some of the great rivers in the world that we've talked about and that we want to transform this river into. And for me, ultimately, it's really about people coming down here and seeing it with their own eyes. Once they do that, it's funny how they sort of, their experiences and their desires and their wants sort of inform the process of river transformation itself. The best ideas I've had about the river revitalization have come from folks while we're just walking along the river, while we're biking along the river. So ultimately, it's that experiential thing that's, I think, ultimately so important.
Yeah, I've only been here for like 24 hours now, but I've been offered a beautiful tour today, and I've visited a lot of places by the river. I've seen new parks, and I've seen people cycling and horse riding and running, and I thought there were so many opportunities and also so many enthusiastic people that I met today, that I think you're going to do a great job here if you continue doing what you're doing, getting people together and trying to get your plans done step by step. It's not going to be done in a year or in a few years. It will be a long-term program. But if you keep believing in it, and I think you can with all the people that are supporting it now, I think you're going to make a great job.
Well, has anyone had a date at the LA River? You did? Oh, okay, good. That's what happened in Seoul. The original stream was covered, as I said before early in the beginning, was covered, and the water was rotting in the bottom. And it was become something close to red light district. Nobody wants to go underneath, and to close to the covered part of even though the cover. But once the river was uncovered and was revitalized, and now it becomes Seoul's very popular tourism spot. And I took my wife to the Cheonggyecheon River, take a stroll, walk, and I took my kids and in the end of the year, we had Christmas trees and all the light ornaments. It became very popular spot. It became the you must go place in Seoul when you visit Seoul. So that means we can do the same thing in the LA River. You can see, well, you can take your date to the LA River. You can have a sip of coffee, or you can have I personally ride inline skating, and Seoul has a lot of places you could do it. And also, while you're skating, you can see all these screens and people walking by, running, jogging by, biking by. And when people wants to go someplace, we just go take a ride and just stop at the river and take us a little walk. So that kind of thing can happen in the LA River, and the river becomes a part of your life, and it becomes the hot spot in Long Beach or the lower part of the LA River. And so that's the things I want to see, and maybe that's if I use my wand and make things happen, that could be the one of the things that I
Thank you.
So I haven't read the plan, I'm sorry, but what I would like to see is, I don't know if any of you, when you get up, you'll see that there's a storm drain right behind us. There's about a storm drain about every 15 feet. There are 1,000 miles of storm drains underneath us in LA County, all pouring water into this river. And where does it come from? It comes from the sky, it comes from the mountains, but it also mainly comes from roads with little cuts in them, and people throw everything into them. Any kind of fertilizer that you have on your lawn, all of this stuff is thrown into the drains. So a lot of what we hope will happen is that you'll open up some of these storm drains and turn them into creeks. And that will come through the city, and that you'll get really natural areas there. And then people will really want to see that when they get down here. And we need to figure out a way to green this river too. I think that will bring the connection much closer. Clean water and a green river.
Thank you. So one of the things that I like to do, usually during the weekend, probably Saturday and Sunday, but at least one of the two, you can find me actually biking down the river. And usually I bike towards Long Beach, and the wind is always bad, just bad wind. But I just keep going. And one of the reasons that I keep going, not only because obviously I want to complete my ride, but I always like to get to the point when I turn into the Long Beach after the bridge that gets really nice and full with water, with a lot of live vegetation, birds, you can see fish sometimes, and then you keep going and you see how it opens into the ocean. That is a stretch of about 4 miles that is just really nice to see, and you forget about the wind just looking at that. So I also have gone the other direction. It takes a while before you get to a point where you can see life like that. So it will be really nice that everyone that goes to the river had the opportunity to see that just within a few miles of where they live. So with that said, how do you think the revitalization of the river will contribute to the improvement of the health and the public health of the communities that live within the surrounding areas?
That's a huge question. It's a huge question. It was a huge part of what the working group focused on, was the recreational opportunities. The districts, the district that I represent, the 9 cities that I represent are park poor. They're communities. If you pull out your smartphone right now and Google the 100 densest cities in the United States, you'll find 5 of my cities in the top 50. You'll find 4 cities are more densely populated. 4 cities in my district are more densely populated than Chicago, for example. But they don't have the large parks that a lot of big cities have. They don't have a lot of the large green spaces that a lot of these communities have. So we suffer from a tremendous amount of childhood obesity. We suffer from early onset of diabetes and a lot of other health-related maladies. So to a large extent, I think this river the river revitalization is central to those efforts. And I think the community that does use the river right now gets that, as you do, as I do, when we're biking and when you see parents pushing their kids along the river in strollers. And I always think that the child in that stroller is probably 99% more likely to become familiar with the river and become familiar with using this as a recreational space than those kids who aren't out there. And I think it's those early experiences, particularly for children, that'll have a long-term impact on the health of these communities.
Thank you.
What I see in our environment is that people enjoy being out at the riverside, enjoying nature. We've seen the water getting cleaner because of all the measures we've taken over the last few years, last 10 years, and we aren't there yet. We still have to do a lot, but already we see fish that weren't there for a long time. It has come back to the river. And what I also find very important is that children get to know their nature again. So education is growing. Classes take their children to the river, do little tests at the riverside. And, well, you being a biologist must like this. And the children enjoy it very much. They come home, they tell their parents about it, and they go back with their parents to experience the same. So I agree with you. It's very important to let our children see all the joy of nature, of water, and also, of course, tell them about the dangers, because our river is not suitable for swimming. But children don't know that if you don't tell them, because they think water is water and we'll go in. But it's a very fast river and very strong, so you can never swim, you can never survive swimming in that river. So I find it very important to get children to the riverside, to enjoy it, to tell them about the river, to tell them about nature, and hope they will continue telling others.
Okay. Well, if you have a place to go and enjoy close by, it's very important for the kids to have those places, because it's back in Seoul we have all the city itself is very well developed, but we have very little green, and people are because the city was developing, the plan was not had the green places undermined. But after we certain years, we realized that we have to have some kind of the natural or the ecological places, the ecological friendly places around us that will help these children develop the good sense of appreciating the nature. And now we have many places in Seoul we can go there, like river running down. There's a fish actually living there, and you can see the weeds are growing, and people can enjoy there, and that will give the kids more you call it a peace of mind.
So another piece of history, in the 1940s, we had steelhead trout, big ones, like this.
So what did you say?
That made it up this river from the harbor all the way to Winnipeg. They would regularly come here. And when you go down now to Long Beach, you see that people are fishing. And I want them to be safe when they're doing that. And I think that if kids and their families get to go fish, they get to connect with the river, they get to come into the river, we'll have a better community, they'll have a better community. I'm just amazed that we were able to get Flood Control District to let us have this festival down here. It's a sign of big change. It's a sign of big change. People want it, and they're responding to it.
Thank you. So I'm going to open it to the audience for questions.
Are there any plans about localizing agriculture in this immediate area with river revitalization?
Not that I know of. Good idea.
Thanks very much for your remarks. I have a question about for our Korean, Dutch, and Colombian panelists. How, when it comes to the revitalization, that you've experienced with your respective rivers, a couple of them in Colombia, how expensive is it? Is it prohibitive? Do you have to? Is it a fight for money? Is it not so tough? I'm just thinking that oftentimes when you're dealing with these kinds of projects, welcome the Assemblyman's comments as well. How much of a fight is it for funds?
Yes, it is expensive. It's not a fight because we realize, everybody in the Netherlands realizes that if you spend the money, you get something back. It's not just giving the money to something that you will never get it returned, because you get more safety, you get more recreation, you get more liveliness at the river, and it's difficult to say how much that's worth. So if you spend like the big measure that I brought photos of in Nijmegen, if you spend 350 million euros, it's an enormous amount of money. But we see that we profit so much from this measure, not only safety but also all the other things I mentioned, that people realize it's worth it. And we've all put money together. It's money from the state, it's money from the city, money from the county, the province. And if you all work together and if you all get your goals, what's that word? If you all succeed in getting your goals, then this cooperation is worth it. And if one government gives money, the other will say, oh, in that case, we will also give some money. So that's another profit of working together. It's very important that we found that you are very clear to each other about your goals and about the things you want to get developed. Because you can help each other, but if you're not very open about it, you can also be in each other's ways. So that's one of the lessons we learned. You have to work together in a very open way. You have to discuss everything, to trust each other, and to be able to hold each other firmly when it gets difficult. Because it always gets difficult at certain points. But we got through it, and we are very proud of what we've done in Nijmegen.
Thank you. It's a good.
Maybe I'm not really involved with the government, the project in its all, so maybe it's not really fit for me to answer that question.
Part of the answer to the question is it depends on what you want to do. Most of the things that our working group talked about were pretty expensive. When you're talking about adding more green space, when you're talking about adding a lot of the amenities, yeah, it does get expensive. That being said, if you start to balance those costs with stormwater capture, which we're not doing enough of, if you start to counterbalance those costs by thinking about all the money we're spending because battling with children who have obesity, if you start to think about all the money that we have to spend with other health-related maladies, then it starts to pencil out, and it starts to make a lot of sense. So, and I think we've done a good job in and around the river revitalization of talking about that investment and talking about what that investment means. My colleague Wendy Carrillo is here. We just passed a state budget that has a significant investment for the river in the state budget. We just passed the voters in California passed a park bond in November, another significant investment in the river. So I think most good things can at times be expensive, but they tend to be investments, and based on public opinion and based on the various park bonds that we've passed, it seems as though people understand those investments.
Thank you. Same thing from my experience. It is expensive. The projects in Bogota and Medellin began discussion about the same time. Bogota is still in discussion. Medellin already revitalized part of the river. It has increased their tourism. They have a lights festival during Christmas that became so popular that now the companies in Medellin that used to install the lights in Medellin for the festival go around the country and install lights in other places of the country. So the cost has been recovered based on the benefits, long-term benefits of the investment.
Hi, my name is Muriel, and my question is more in regards to the future of development. In the upper LA River, there has been a huge debate with some of the citizens in that area because of developers coming in and proposing their own ideas of having front apartments, front water apartments, and things like that. What are some of the parameters that you're establishing so that this lower part of the LA River actually maintains and is part of the community, and the community is not alienated later on in the future with developers coming in and saying, no, actually, now we see that this is beautiful and we want to construct here? What are some of the parameters you're establishing?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I was really impressed with the extent to which the conversation around gentrification started early on. I mentioned the fact that we had 18 meetings through that working group, and the subject of gentrification came up in the first meeting, and it was consistent throughout the conversation. One of the challenges that we have here in the lower river that makes it more difficult than the upper river is the upper river. You have one governance structure. You have the city of Los Angeles in its entirety. Here, I believe you have something like 9 different city governments just from the city of Los Angeles boundary to Long Beach. A lot of those local decisions about planning, about inclusionary housing, are city government decisions. That being said, the conversations that we had and the working group, the finalized plan, did talk about housing in and along the river, but they all talked about making sure that they were everything from at-cost housing to at-market housing to low-income housing, making sure that we had family housing, making sure that a lot of the nonprofit organizations who have residential services and that have really been displaced in other parts of my district, that they're also included in this discussion along the river as well. That being said, again, where I think we have to be really vigilant, we really have to watch folks, is to remember that in this part of the river anyway, those are local decisions of a whole bunch of different cities, and it's sometimes more difficult to hold 9, 10, 11 entities accountable than it is to hold a single entity accountable.
Thank you.
How will this change the predators of the ecosystem? Will this affect the... No. How will this affect all the predators of the fish? How will this affect where they live and what they do?
It's an excellent question. Anyone wants to go first?
I studied philosophy, so I'm going to have Dr. Fierro answer that question since I know nothing about science.
Oh, that sounds great. Yes, thank you. And all we count on friends to put you on the spot. That is an incredibly good question. There has been some damage done to the river when we essentially pave over the river. As it was mentioned earlier, the waters of the river used to flow down the riverbed, and they used to filter down to the ground below us, to the aquifers and so on. And the river used to be dry for many months of the year on top, but there was life under it. As we paved the river, over time, some areas keep life year-round. So you will have a lot of vegetation that depend on the local community, a lot of algae, a lot of birds, a lot of marine life. They live there after many years of having been displaced elsewhere. They found a new habitat. So the challenge when you do repair parts of the river is to make sure that the same ecosystems are created elsewhere for them to be able to start their new cycles. If we were to lift the riverbed at once and do not create marshes or creeks, as was mentioned before, all these living things in those particular areas essentially will be displaced and more likely will die. So the biggest challenge, besides the construction around the river that will take place when you revitalize a place, will be to create new spaces where ecosystem could thrive. If you revitalize the river and forget about the ecosystem and the new green spaces, we will have the same issue we have today, but in a different form and probably worse in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Fierro, and thank you all the speakers and Pacific Council, Jennifer. Thank you all for participating and contributing to this conversation.